Good morning, everyone. Today, we are learning chapter 2 in the laws of Eruvin. Now, we're going to be speaking about what happens when we have a courtyard. You have a courtyard, right? And you establish an Eruv, and you want to be able to carry in that common area, which is the courtyard. So there are many people that live in the same courtyard. Each one has their home and so on and so forth. What is the process? The process is that you need to be able to have everybody share the courtyard. Everybody needs to be equal in their ownership of the courtyard in order to be able to have equal access to it and carry from your house to it and so on and so forth. Like this, it becomes one big communal courtyard. So what happens? What's the halakha? What's the rationale? Here comes the Rambam and says the following. Anshe chatzer she'eruvu kulan. When you have the people of a courtyard that all of them made an eruv, chutz me'echad mehem shelo erev imahem. One person decided to exclude himself and say, I'm not part of this eruv. What happens? Ben memezid, ben shocheach, whether he did it willingly, whether he forgot to be part of the eruv, areze oser alehem, then automatically he makes that all the residents are not able to carry because he personally did not include himself. Vasur lekulan leotzi mibatehem lechatzer umechatzer lebatehem. People cannot carry from their courtyard to their house and their house to their courtyard. So what should we do? What's the solution now? We have 10 people in a courtyard. One nudnik is not interested in or forgot to participate with them. So if he says, you know what, I have a part of the ownership, let's say we are 10, so 10% of the courtyard I own. I completely subordinate my ownership. I relinquish my ownership to all of you. They're allowed to carry from their homes to the courtyard and the courtyard to their homes. But they're not allowed to carry to his house. What happens if he relinquishes the ownership of his house and the courtyard? Then everybody is allowed. What does that mean? They are allowed to carry in and out of the homes and go even to his house because they made an eruv. And he relinquished his house, the ownership of his house and his courtyard. And he, so too, is allowed to carry from his house outside to the courtyard or to any other person's house. Because now he is nullified to them because he doesn't have any ownership whatsoever in this courtyard or in his house. And he is considered to be like a guest, and therefore a guest does not have the power to prohibit. So let's look here. What happens? The logic, the rationale you're going to see right here.
It only works when we are all in on it. If one person steps out, the group is broken. The exact same applies to an Eruv.
So you understand the concept. It's just like an electrical connection. If somebody is not going to participate in it, then he ruins it for everybody else. A person who is going to support. Yes?
And he relinquish it on a temporary basis.
We're going to be speaking about all these cases right now. A lot of interesting cases. So let's try to follow here. and afterwards we'll get to questions with great pleasure. The Rambam is going to get very detailed, and it's going to get very intense. This is just the appetizer. Good luck. Please refrain from smoking and tighten your seatbelts. When a person subordinates the ownership of his property without specifying his intent, then we assume that he only relinquished his ownership of his participation, his ownership in the courtyard, but not his house. And when somebody does relinquish his ownership to the other people of the courtyard, he needs to specify to you, Reuven, to Shimon, to Levi, to Israel, etc., etc. What happens if, God forbid, Jack, the son of Joe passes away, and now Jack becomes his heir? He is able now to nullify and relinquish the ownership of the house to the people of the courtyard. If this happened during Shabbat, because the inheritor is instead, literally instead, of the person that was the owner. And you are allowed on Shabbat to relinquish your ownership on Shabbat. See if I have any. Just want to see if I have any thing else I want to show you. Okay. So let's see here what happens. We're going to see here clearer in this video.
Come on, everybody! The meal is starting! Bring out your food!
Huh? Why didn't our Eruv work?
Oish, I forgot to join the Eruv. Okay, I give up my rights to the courtyard. It belongs to everyone now. Hey, Yankel, you have that really beautiful wine in your house. Want to go grab it? What? Why am I locked out of my own house? I forfeit and give up ownership of my house as well.
L'chaim. You understand? It's a nice way to review and not to forget what we're learning. Okay, next thing you know, we're going to come out with video games where a person will be able to relinquish his courtyard, relinquish this and that, and so on and so forth. If conversely, those who join in the Eruv, they relinquish their ownership of their domain to a person who did not join the Eruv. What happens? He didn't join the Eruv. Everybody did join the Eruv, and they relinquished their power to him, their property to him. Hu mutar, he is allowed. Sharei nishar levado, because now he is allowed to carry, because he is the sole owner of property. Ve'asurim, but they are prohibited. Shelo nishar lahem reshut, because now they're propertyless. Then you might say, maybe, what do you mean? Maybe they could be considered his guests. It says no, because this type of amount of people are not going to be considered guests amongst that person to be considered that they could carry. The following rule applies when there are two or more individuals who did not participate in the Eruv. If they relinquish their rights to those who did do an Eruv, those who did an Eruv are allowed to carry, and those who did not do an Eruv are not permitted to carry. and those who participated in the Eruv are not able to subordinate their ownership of their domain to the two who did not participate. Why? Because there's two. Each one of them causes the other to be forbidden to carry. ואפילו חזר האחד שלא ערב וביטל רשותו לשני שלא ערב, הרי זה אסור שבשעה שביטלו לא המערבין, אסור היה. Even if one of those who did not participate decides to relinquish the ownership of his domain to the other person who did not participate, that could be a good solution. They're still forbidden to carry, since at the time when the others relinquished their ownership of their domain to him, he was not allowed to carry. A person who made an eruv is not allowed to relinquish his ownership to somebody that did not make an eruv. On the other hand, a person that did not make an eruv is allowed to relinquish his property to somebody who did an eruv. Gets a little complicated exactly who is allowed to do what, but the whole concept is that we want to make sure that everything, just like that cycle, just like we saw the current, right, the electrical current happen, we want everything to be in a perfect sync. If not, we're going to have a little problem. Okay, let's continue. כשם שבעל הבית זה מבטל לבעל הבית זה רשותו בחצר אחת. כך מבצעים מחצר לחצר, מבטלים וחוזרים מבטלים. So we said before that a homeowner is allowed to relinquish his ownership of his domain to another homeowner, right? In a single courtyard. They're all sharing courtyards. So I'm able to say, you know what, I relinquish my property to you. So too, the inhabitants of one courtyard can subordinate the ownership of their domain to the inhabitants of another courtyard. Like this, they'll be able to carry everywhere. After a person has relinquished his domain, the recipient can in turn subordinate it to the original owner. What does that mean? For example, we're going to see what that means practically speaking. You have two people which are in a courtyard. Both these people did not make an eruv. The other one says, you know what? I don't have any ownership here. So you're the sole owner of the whole courtyard. And therefore you're able to carry. And the guy carries and does whatever he needs to do. Now the other person says, 1 second, I want to carry too. He says, don't worry, I'm going to relinquish. So Shimon relinquishes to Reuven his ownership. Now Reuven is the sole. Imagine we only have two people. Just I don't want to get you confused with the case where we had 10 people in the courtyard. We only have two people in that courtyard. So only if you made an eruv are you allowed to carry, or if you're the sole owner of the whole property. So if I, Shimon, relinquish my power to you, Reuven can carry whatever he wants. So he could do that. I relinquish my power to you. You want to get something. And afterwards says, I need to carry in the Rishon. Oh, no problem. So Reuven is going to relinquish his power to Shimon. And then Shimon will be able to carry. And we can do this. It's not a problem. וחוזר השני מבטל רשותו לראשון ובטלטל הראשון ברשותו שביטל לו וכן כמה פעמים ויש ביטול רשות בחורבה כדי רשות בחצר, and once may subordinate his ownership of a ruin the same manner he does of his courtyard. I think we have a nice video with this, if I'm not mistaken. I saw something very nice earlier. I don't know where it disappeared. No, that's not the one. Help! Where did my video go? Okay. I don't know where it disappeared. I had a super video here. A Coca-Cola video. Okay, 1 second. I'm gonna call my technician and ask him what happened. Sorry, it's such a nice video that I wouldn't want to miss it. Israel, I'm on my class right here, and we're live. And there's a video that's missing for Halacha Hey. I saw it earlier, and it disappeared. And I think it had to do with somebody wanting to get some Coca-Cola in the middle of Shabbat in the courtyard. Can you check it out and maybe go in and add it? Thank you so much. Okay, guys, I guess we'll get back to that in a second. But you got the gist. Halacha Vav. Mi shebitel reshuto v'chazar v'tiltel v'reshut shebitel. A person now relinquished his ownership of his domain to whatever, to a group of people, the people that were in the courtyard. And now he's not allowed to carry, right? That he carried. If he carried the article willingly, then he shows that you never relinquished your ownership to me because you're carrying. And if he did it inadvertently, he does not make them, he does not prohibit them from carrying. You understand? If you relinquish your ownership, and afterwards you carry once you in the place where you relinquish your ownership, it shows that you didn't never relinquish your ownership. If you did it by accident, we consider it that it was an accident, but you really relinquished your ownership, and therefore everybody is able to carry. When do you willingly, if you carry willingly in a place that you already relinquished your ownership, do you make it prohibited for everybody to carry? If they did not make use of that property that you relinquished yet. If they did start walking and carrying in that area, then it's okay. You can go and cry till tomorrow. You relinquish your ownership, and we can continue carrying. When there are two houses which are on opposite sides of a public domain. So now, on a public domain, we know we can't carry in a public domain. And Gentiles decided for whatever reason to make a partition on Shabbat, which now made the whole thing into a courtyard instead of a public domain. And the owners of the homes may not subordinate their ownership of domain to one another. Why? Because since at the moment of yesterday, before Shabbat came in, at the moment that Shabbat came in, they could not carry there. Therefore, now they're not able to carry either, and they can't relinquish their property and make it into a private domain. Right. Let's say, for example, another case. I told you this gets very interesting in every possible situation. The question is, let's get practical for a second, okay? Guys, I understand that you want to know practicality. Well, first of all, if you don't have a home yet, I wish you to have a home. It's like this: if you have a home, you have a courtyard, and maybe you'll be living in a community, like a gated community, and over there you want to be able to carry. What do you do in these situations? We're going to find out later what happens if you live in a building. You live in a building. You live in a building and you want to carry from one place to the other. So how do you do that? We're going to find out a little later, B'ezrat Hashem, in the halachot. But all of these interesting details, or it's because this is something practical, believe it or not. Okay, so let's go back to what we said before. We have Shnei Batim b'Shnei Tzidei Reshut HaRabim. There are two houses on opposite sides of the public domain. And now we said that the Goyim decided to put a partition there. You could not do an Eruv before because it was a public domain. Then there you couldn't carry, and therefore you can't do it now. What happens in the case where one of the inhabitants of the courtyard dies, and he left his estate to someone living elsewhere? Okay, so now you have somebody living on Upitzville, and this is Jackson Village. And he left, even though he owns a property in Jackson Village, but he lives in Upitzville and he died. So now, this property now belongs not to him, Shimon, it belongs to Levi. What do we do? If he dies before the commencement of Shabbat, since the person that's going to inherit him is not an inhabitant of the courtyard, he causes carrying to be forbidden. And if basically the Eruv was already done, right, and it was already, so at that moment, even though if he's going to die during Shabbat, it's after the fact, and he cannot prohibit by him not participating in this chain because he was already part of the chain before. The following rule applies when a person who lives outside the courtyard but who owns a house within the courtyard dies. And he left as an inheritance his domain to one of the inhabitants of the courtyard. If he passed away before Shabbat, carrying is not forbidden, right? Because all of the inhabitants participated in the Eruv. If he passed away after Shabbat, after the commencement of Shabbat, then carrying is going to be forbidden until the heir, the person that inherited the house, which lives there in the courtyard, is going to subordinate, is going to relinquish his ownership of the domain that he inherited to others. And like this, everybody's all about this electric chain, right? I think that was a brilliant, actually, video. If you think, one second, let me see if my technician here, our technician got back that thing. I just need to press sync over here. And I see what we said before about relinquishing one to the other. No, I don't see that my Coca-Cola video came back. And I really am thirsty for a Coca-Cola. By the way, it's not healthy. I'm not. This is a... So, no, I don't see it. So it's still not here. Sorry, I synced and it's still not here. I love it. Some technical problems, guys. You're with us in this. So let's continue. Israel, the following rule applies when you have a Jew and a hairless convert. Not a hairless convert. A hairless convert. I mean to say, a convert that basically once you convert it, right, at that moment that you converted and you don't have any heirs, he never got married, all of his family members from before are no longer considered family members, right? So in that case, he is no longer called, he doesn't have anybody to relinquish his how do you call it, nobody's going to inherit him. Oh, here it is. We found it. We found the picture, guys. Sorry. Let me finish the halakha. I'm getting a little excited here. Things are happening on my computer while I'm speaking to you, so I'm getting distracted. So you have a Jew and a convert that doesn't have anybody to inherit him. And the convert passed away before Shabbat. אף על פי שלא החזיק ישראל האחר בנכסיו עד שחשכה, הרי זה המחזיק אוסר עד שיבטל, שהרי הוא כיורש. Even though the Jew did not take possession before nightfall, because what happens is when a person doesn't have somebody to inherit him, then his property becomes ownerless. He doesn't have anybody, so anybody could grab that property. It says even though there's no Jew that took possession of that property before nightfall, right? The person that's going to take possession of the property, the moment he's going to take the possession of the property, right, he is able to actually prohibit the others from carrying at that moment, because he is considered like a yoresh, like an inheritor. Ve'im met hager mishechashecha, if the convert dies after nightfall, even though a Jew is going to take possession of his property, right, he's not going to prohibit everybody from carrying. The same way that convert had already relinquished or participated in the Eruv or whatever it is, and he is they were allowed to carry before, the fact that he passed away and somebody else is going to take possession is not going to take away the power for everybody to be able to carry. So here's my Coca-Cola, finally. Okay, so I don't know how well and how clear you can see it. I'm just going to read it because I thought it was cute. This was done by our dear Shmuel El Kayam. Great job. Baruch Hashem, I want to thank Rabbi Tovi for being there always to review things the last minute. So, Mrs. Esther says to her husband, go down to the Rune and bring up some drinks for Shabbat. And don't forget to fill up the water pitcher while you're there. You see, all women tell the husband not to forget. Right? So there's a mitzvah in the Torah to forget, but you can forget something in the field for the poor people, not, right? Anyways, so he goes. And at that moment, he says, why are you here? He says, I'm here to get some Coca-Cola or to fill up some more water pitcher. He says, I can't believe we did this again, neighbor. Did what? We forgot to make an Eruv. And there are two neighbors. There's only two people sharing a courtyard. He says, and the guy says, I need that ice-cold Coca-Cola for my Oneg Shabbat. There's a mitzvah to take pleasure in Shabbat. He says, you know what? I have an idea. Let's follow the Rambam. What did the Rambam say? He says, don't give up. Be mevatel. Relinquish your reshut, your property to me. So, he says, wouldn't that be literally giving up? He says, no, it can go both ways. You're going to relinquish your property to me. I'll carry out my drinks, bring them to my wife. She'll be happy. And then I'll relinquish my property to you and you can carry, basically. And you could do this over and over again. Anyways, that was for the halakha that we saw earlier. But since I wanted to get fresh, and I just interrupted the class and went back. So let's continue. Israel Adarim Ha'oved Kochavim. When a Jew dwells together with a Gentile, or what's called a Ger Toshav, a person that accepted the mitzvot, 7 mitzvot, in a courtyard, bechatzer, eno oser alav. Right, so what happens is the presence of the non-Jew does not cause carrying to be forbidden. Why? Because his dwelling is insignificant, right? If, however, it wasn't a Jew and a non-Jew, it was 2 Jews that are sharing a courtyard, and there was one non-Jew which is with them in the same courtyard. That non-Jew, that connection that we spoke about at the beginning, right? is going to be disconnected, and therefore they won't be able to carry. This is a decree that was made by rabbis that a non-Jew can actually nullify the power of Eruv, of carrying, to make it all one courtyard and so on and so forth, from the Jews. Why? In order that we should not mix. There shouldn't be any mixing, and then learn from their conduct and so on and so forth. If that's the case, we don't want to learn from one another. A second ago, you said that if there's going to be one non-Jew and one Jew, the non-Jew is not counted, and the Jew is allowed to carry in that courtyard. But if there's two Jews, right, and one non-Jew, it's a problem. So he says, he says, because when there's one Jew and one non-Jew, the Jew might be scared that the non-Jew, it's not like we're very, very loved by our enemies, that the non-Jew maybe will attack him, and we're not allowed to be to be alone with a non-Jew, right? A Gentile, especially one which is hostile. שני ישראלים ועובד כוכבים מזלות אחד השוכנים בחצר אחד והראו הישראלים לעצמן לא הועילו כלום. לא הועילו כלום. When you have two Jews and a Gentile live in a separate home, in a single courtyard, and the Jews establish in Eruv, their actions are of no consequence whatsoever. וכן אם ביטלו לעובד כוכבים מזלות, או ביטל להם, או ביטלו הישראלים זה לזה, ונעשו כאחים עם העובד כוכבים מזלות, לא הועילו כלום. Not only that, if they relinquish their ownership to the non-Jew, or the non-Jew relinquishes his ownership to them, they didn't do anything. They didn't accomplish anything. שאין עירוב מועיל במקום העובד כוכבים מזלות, because the Eruv does not work where there's a Gentile or an idol worshipper. ואין ביטול רשות מועיל במקום עובד כוכבים ומזלות. Yeah. And the same thing, the relinquishing of property is useless. So how do you get it? How do you do it? Sometimes you do share property with a non-Jew and so on and so forth. So how are you going to be able to carry in that situation? So the only way to do it, there's no alternative than just renting from the Gentiles' domain. By renting from the Gentiles' domain, then he'll be considered as a Jew's guest. And that is not a problem. The same thing, if there were many non-Jews, then you rent their property, basically, to the Jews. And then the Jews will do an Eruv, and they'll be allowed to carry. וישראל אחד ששכר מן העובד כוכבים ומזלות, מערב עם שאר הישראלים ויתרו כולם. When one Jew rents from a Gentile's domain, he may then establish an Eruv with the other Jews, allowing them all to carry. ואין כל אחד ואחד צריך לזכור מן העובד כוכבים ומזלות. You don't need that every single Jew that's there in the courtyard to rent from the non-Jew. Okay. שתי חצרות, I think we have a graphic for that one. 1 second. Yeah, we do. Okay, let's look at that graphic while I explain it. Okay? שתי חצרות זו לפנים מזו. The following rule applies when there are two courtyards, one leading to the other. וישראל אחד ועובד כוכבים ומזלות דרים מפנימית. In the inner courtyard live a Jew and a non-Jew. If you remember, we said in that case, it's possible that the Jew is going to carry. פנימית וישראל אחד בחיצונה. I'm sorry. Yeah. And then there's a non-Jew there's a Jew in the outer courtyard. In the inner courtyard, you have a Jew and a non-Jew. Outside in the external courtyard, you have a Jew that lives there. So, ישראל אחד ועובד כוכבים ומזלות דרים בפנימית, וישראל אחד בחיצונה, או שישראל ועובד כוכבים ומזלות בחיצונה, וישראל אחד בפנים. Or if it's the opposite, where you have the Jew and the non-Jew living in the outside courtyard, and the Jew living in the inner courtyard, הרי זה אוסר על החיצונה עד שיזכור ממנו שערי רגלי שני ישראלים ועובד כוכבים ומזלות מצויים שם, והפנימי מותר בפנימית. So he says, wow, how do you fix this situation? So you have two Jews and one non-Jew. We've already explained that before. So he says, in such a situation, the Gentiles' presence causes carrying to be forbidden in the outer courtyard until the Jews are going to rent his domain, since it's used by two Jews and a Gentile, just like we said earlier in the halakha. And the Jew who lives in the inner courtyard, by contrast, may carry in the inner courtyard. Halakha Yud Bet. Today we have, I think, 17 halachot. 16. Sorry. Good. Sochim מן העובד כוכבים. ומזלות אפילו בשבת. You're allowed to go into a rental agreement, obviously not to write, but an oral rental agreement, on Shabbat itself with a non-Jew. שהשכירות כביטול רשות היא, because renting is basically relinquishing it's comparable to relinquishing your domain, the ownership of your domain. שאין השכירות ודאית, because it's not a for sure contract. אלא היכר בלבד, it's only something to make a distinction. We just want to show. Remember, all of these laws, which are rabbinical, all of this is in order. We should not forget the Torah Eruv. We should not forget about carrying a courtyard. It looks, could look like a public domain, and so on and so forth. You're going to get used to do it here. You'll do it there. So these are all things that we want to stand out as a remembrance, as a reminder of where we stand and why we're allowed to do it here and we can't do it there. And for the same reason, one is allowed to rent the Gentile's domain even for less than the value of a puta, which is a very, very, very minimal value. Not only that, even the wife of the Gentile is allowed to rent out her property without asking her husband. I'm just thinking about the problems of Shalom Bayit afterwards. By the way, I'm going to give you the secret of Shalom Bayit. Okay, you want the secret of Shalom Bayit in 2 words, right? From the expert himself. If you want Shalom, buy it. Anyways, let's continue. Guys, you guys are great. It's 11:40. You're still with us. I don't know how you do it. Get a life. No, this is your life. Studying Torah in the middle of the day.
You're great. FYI.
Okay, let's continue. This is your life, guys. You're studying Torah in the middle of the day. It's like the greatest possible commitment you can make to Hashem. Say, Hashem, you're the owner of my life. At the end of the day, you are the one that's going to pay the bills, give me my nachas for my kids, give me everything I need. So you give me 1,440 minutes a day, right? I can certainly give you half an hour a day, which is only 60 minutes. Imagine 60 minutes out of 1,440 minutes. It's not a lot. It's really not a lot. All right, let's continue. So, and so too, the Gentile's hired worker or his servants can rent out his domain without his knowledge. Oh boy. Even if they were Jewish, they could do it even without his consent or his knowledge. It's consent. I said the word consent. I don't know if that's correct. His knowledge. If a person asks a Gentile permission to use a place in the Gentile's domain to store some of his possessions, and the Gentile said, okay, please use, he's considered as being a partner in the Gentile's domain, and therefore that's another solution. Accordingly, he may rent out the Gentile's domain on his behalf without knowledge. Right? So before you start giving storage to anybody, be careful what you do, right? Let's continue. Hayu לעובד כוכבים מזלות שני שכירים או שמשים ונשים רבות אם יזכיר אחד מהם דיו. What happens if the Gentile has many workers, many wives, and so on and so forth? Then it doesn't matter who it is, of his wives, of his workers, they can all relinquish, rent out his property for that purpose. שני ישראלים ועובד כוכבים ומזלות הדרים בחצר אחד. 2 Jews and a Gentile living in a same courtyard. ושכרו מן העובד כוכבים ומזלות בשבת, and they rented on Shabbat the property of the non-Jew. חוזר האחד מבטל רשותו לשני ומותר. Then what happens now? Obviously they didn't make an eruv, but now they need to carry. So what happens is that once they rented that property from him, one is able to, just like we said before, to nullify his, like we said here. Let me show you the graphic again. Here. Just like we said here, one can nullify, relinquish his property, his ownership to the other, and they can carry. They found that basically the non-Jew is no longer there to block them, and there's only a courtyard with 2 Jews, and one relinquishes his permission to the other, and therefore carrying will be permitted. Afterwards, I'm going to have to make a confession at the end of this class. So if you stay till the end of the class, you're going to hear a confession from the rabbi. The following rule applies when one Gentile rents his property to another. אם אין הראשון יכול להוציא עובד כוכבים מזלות השני עד שישלים זמן זכיחותו צורכים מזה העובד כוכבים מזלות השני שהרי נכנס תחת הבעלים. If it is impossible for the owner to evict the second Gentile until the conclusion of his rental contract, so who do you rent the property from? The first Gentile or the second? No, the second one, because the second one has established a contract. He has a contract that keeps him there for a certain period of time. Why? So he says, because he takes the place of the owner. If the case is that at any time he can tell him to go pfeifen, go fly a kite, get out of my apartment, get out of my house. It says if the renter is not present, they could actually go to the person that rented him, the original owner, and rent from him, and it's okay. Then they're able to carry. So the following rule applies when there are several Jews and a Gentile living in the same courtyard. We're not talking about 2 Jews. We're talking about 1. Okay? We're not talking about, 2 Jews, but several Jews. והיו חלונות פתוחות מבית ישראל זה לבית ישראל זה, ישראלי זה. And there are 2 windows. There's a window which is going to be open from this Jew to this Jew. ועשו עירוב דרך חלונות. And they established an עירוב via the windows. אף על פי שאין מותרים להוציא מבית לבית דרך חלונות, הרי אין אסורים להוציא מבית לבית דרך פתחים. Even though they're allowed to carry from one window to the other, Sometimes the windows are close enough. They're not allowed to carry from one door to the other because of the non-Jews which are there. Till they're going to rent. As we said before, that the many are not able to be considered as one till they're going to rent the property from the non-Jew. Israel shu mechalel Shabbat beferes. What happens to a Jew, chas v'shalom, that desecrates the Shabbat publicly, or shu oved avodah zarah, or he started worshiping idols? Then, for that specific case, he's going to be considered like a non-Jew. Then he can't relinquish you can't do an eruv with him. He can't relinquish his property. You're going to have to rent, just like you would rent from a non-Jew. אבל אם היה פיקור מן האפיקורסות שאין עובדים עבודה זרה, ואין מכנים שבת כגון סוכים ובייתוסים וכל הכופרים בתורה שבעל פה, כלא של דבר, כל מי שאינו מודה במצוות עירוב, אין מערבין עמו, לפי שאינו מודה בעירוב, אין זוכים ממנו, לפי שאינו כעובד כוכבים מזלות, אבל מבטל הוא רשותו לישראל הכשר, וזוהי תקנתו. So he says what happens to a person's epikoros, he does not believe in the oral law, therefore he doesn't believe in eruv. So you can't rent from him. The only thing you can do is he can relinquish his property altogether. The same thing if there were two, one Jew and one apikoros, somebody that doesn't believe in the oral law, right? It's duki. Then he's going to have to relinquish his ownership altogether. So now for the confession. This is the confession moment. I remember it was 3:30 in the morning. And I had this inspiration that we're going to start the Shiur Rambam. Which, by the way, we started the Shiur Rambam. I'm going to verify exactly how many days ago it started. Oh, see, I got some videos. Meanwhile, while we were talking, I got some videos. Maybe I'm going to send these to Israel while I'm sharing this information with you. Here we go. Please, somebody's working hard here while listening to the shiur. 1 second. Sorry, guys. Thank you. I'm going to find out the videos with you. 1 second. Okay. Okay. So I had this inspiration to start the Rambam. I got very excited. I got an adrenaline rush. I could not sleep at night. I was thinking, I'm going to do Rambam. We're going to do this Rambam stuff. We're going to use AI, and we're going to make these laws understandable and everything. So the confession is that at that moment, the first phone call I made, right, was to Rabbi Rabbi Nisan Tovi, which is I call him our editor-in-chief, make sure that everything is in line with halakha. He's with us here. And I'm sure you remember, I had an adrenaline rush, and I was on fire. I think today's 125 days without missing one day of Rambam. Tremendous. I have no idea. So at the same time, I was living a moment of trepidation, because I was thinking to a moment of excitement, first of all, because I was excited. We're going to do this, and this is going to be a big thing, and so on and so forth. But then there was trepidation. And why was I in a state of such nervousness? Why was I so nervous? I was telling him, I remember I was sitting on my balcony at 3:30 in the morning. For him, it was 10 a.m., 10:30, and graciously answered the phone. how am I going to teach the laws of Eruv? These are the most complicated laws. And that's why I'm so excited today. I'm sharing these laws with you. I had to prepare it well. And I hope that I gave it well enough that everybody could understand. So it's, for me, it's a very humbling moment. It's a very special moment. And I want to thank you for joining us. Let's look at these videos that Rabbi Tovi prepared for us. And hopefully we're going to put 2 and 2 together and see exactly which halachot were connected to what. So I want to thank Rabbi Tovi for answering that phone call and actually joining us. I think he's unmuted. Rabbi Tovi, you want to say something?
Something I'd love to, Rabbi. First of all, thank you so much.
One second. I want to add you here at the spotlight here. Rabbi Tovi from Israel, my friends. This is the man.
Shalom Aleichem. How are you? I want to thank especially Rabbi Chay Amar for this incredible opportunity for being a part of this journey. And I want to thank every one of you also for being no less an important part of the journey. I want to share something with you also. This Shabbat, I was in Jerusalem. I live just outside Jerusalem. My granddaughter was born a week and a half ago, and we had a kiddush this Shabbat in Bayit V'Gad. And I'm walking around. Thank you. And I'm walking around, and I'm noticing things that I've known about but never would have noticed before. I'm looking and seeing a neighborhood where there's an enclosed courtyard because there are 5 apartment buildings that share a courtyard, and I see that they bothered erecting a doorpost with an actual door on it at the entrance of the courtyard to make sure that even according to stringent opinions, it would be permissible to carry there on Shabbat. I see a sign over there saying that such and such family has a Filipino foreign worker working with their grandmother, but everyone in the courtyard everyone in the buildings should be aware that they rented permission from him for his apartment. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, the Rambam wrote everything that we learned in today's shir 1,000 years ago, but we are following every one of these things using practical modern application for every one of them. And that's absolutely incredible. And I should mention, Rabbi, also what you've got in these videos is something that I never really thought about. Also, I've gone to hotels for Shabbat time and again. Just this year for Rosh Hashanah, I was in a hotel, and I didn't even think to myself, hey, we're all together. Don't we need an Eruv over here? And if you look at the video, the first video where you see a family walking out of a hotel dining room, you'll understand exactly why that isn't an issue. Perhaps you can show that to the assembly.
I'm going to do it right now. 1 second. Here we go.
Daddy, there are so many people here. Did you make an Eruv with all of them?
Great question. Since we're all eating in the same dining room, no Eruv is required. It's no different than a family.
You understand? Since everybody's eating in the same dining room, so they're all sharing their meal together. So there's no problem.
It's a family dinner. A family dinner. That's what it's considered.
Correct. It's one big family. And this one, Rabbi Tovi?
Well, there's an issue that often comes up when we have a family, an extended family that might be together. Let's say you go away for a Shabbat, common in Israel, where there's an area where you have several different, it's not a formal hotel, they call it simmers over here in Israel. We have vacation apartments that all are around the central courtyard, but you have not one family, but several extended families. Does that mean we need to start collecting 25 loaves of bread for the common Eruv? The answer is that every extended family can have one loaf representing them. And that short second video just comes to illustrate that point.
Hey, you really don't have to carry all those loaves over there. Since we're all considered one household now, bringing over one loaf is enough.
That means that even though we're really not one household, we're all separate families. If we travel together for Shabbat, if the Tovi family, the Amar family, the Levi family are each traveling with their extended family, only 3 contributions to the Eruv will be required.
Exactly. God bless you. Thank you, Rabbi Tovi. Thank you to all for joining us. 125 days of Rambam. God bless you. From strength to strength, we're ready to go and conquer the world with Rambam. Just like the Rambam concludes his whole magnum opus, the world would be filled with the knowledge of God, just like the water covers the seabed. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.